To kick off with, clearly diversity and inclusion is a big topic. It's a challenging topic, it's fraught with some difficulties. But what's interesting is that increasingly the case alongside the societal and cultural impact of diversity and inclusion is being coupled with a business case. So recently McKinsey, at the beginning of this year, published a report which demonstrated that in terms of gender diversity, companies that were in the upper quartile of businesses in terms of gender diversity demonstrated a 15% greater than average level of profit. And in terms of ethnic diversity, they also found that businesses in the upper quartile delivered 33% more than average in terms of profit. So the case is there, but yet by the same token, they also found that there was less action happening in business than they might have expected given that case. So the purpose of today's panel is to bring together a group of people who aren't just talking about it, but are trying and actively doing something about it. So I'll give a quick introduction, and then we'll get into some questions, and I also hope to be able to turn over to the floor as well for your questions a little bit later. So I'm going to start with Isabel Farci. She's the founder and CEO of Creative Mentor Network. She was a Teach First teacher, and she'll talk a little bit more a bit later about her journey. Trevor Johnson is also a mentor at Creative Mentor Network, but is an advisory board member at We Are Stripes, Director of Global Agency Partnerships at Facebook, and also sits on the BEMA Diversity Council. Lucy Doubleday is a managing partner at We Are Social, and is behind the initiative Upstarts, or Creative Upstarts. Peter Chipchase is Chief Communications and Strategy Officer for Soho House, and is behind the Soho Impact initiative. And finally, Kieran Lewis, who is a rapper and grime artist and MC. He studied at Elam, music industry-focused sixth form college, and is also a mentee of Creative Mentor Network. So, if I can kick off, Isabel, maybe start with you. Can you talk about CMN, what it is, and why you started it? What drove you to start that organisation?
Yeah, so we're a charity, and we run. Our main aim is to support young people from diverse backgrounds into careers in the creative industries. And the main way that we do that is through mentoring. So we work a lot with schools and colleges and youth centres all over London. We recruit students and we match them up with mentors who are working in the creative industries, and then we train mentors so that they can have the best and the most impact possible. I started it because I worked as a teacher in a state school in White City, and just noticed that pretty much all of my students, because careers education was so poorly delivered, none of them had access to the opportunities that they deserved. And it was particularly apparent when they came to organise work experience placements, and they ended up doing the only 2 weeks work experience that they had over their whole kind of school career, they ended up doing in their kind of local newsagents or Boots. And I had friends whose little brothers and sisters were doing work experience in amazing kind of advertising agencies, and it felt very, very unfair. In the education system particularly, we sort of focused our students on getting the exam results and getting into university, and that was the kind of ticket to success. And actually that's not the case, and it's so much networks are such an important part of later life success that I felt like that was the thing that I wanted to try and create for those kind of kids.
Trevor, well, along your journey and mentoring and advisory roles, what the and barriers do you see to organisations and business to addressing diversity?
Is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah? Good? Because I've been told to shout as if you couldn't hear me. So I'll start off the reason why I'm passionate and why I think the creative industry in all its forms should take diversity as a core element of what it's about. When I was a kid, I used to play Rocky. Do you know what Rocky is? The boxing film. We used to play that a lot, and I used to play that a lot in the school playground. And we were massive fans of Rocky. And then one day I said, I want to be Rocky. He said, you can't be Rocky because Rocky's white and you're black. Like, well, I want to be Rocky. No, you're Clubber Lang or you're Apollo Creed. That was the first time I realised that I was playing a game I could never win because I wasn't the black character. Oh, sorry, I wasn't the white character. And that throws us to the Black Panther, where that was the first time you had kids who were black kids or minority kids that had a superhero they could play in the playground. That was the first time the creative industry in the form of movies created characters that people that are kids could aspire to. So when I think about why it's important that the creative industry thinks about how they represent themselves, how they look is how it manifests in screens or in adverts, in TV shows. The creative industry has a really huge responsibility to ensure that what it produces reflects society. And I think the barriers to where we are today in terms of not enough people that are of females at senior leadership roles, ethnic minorities, all the other elements of diversity in its own form, it's because the creative industry doesn't represent that. And I think if we can start to address that, which is what we're trying to do, and I'm sure we'll go into the reasons how or why or how we're doing that, I think it's a really important motivation, a really important responsibility that we have in order to ensure that we are driving that diversity agenda. And a lot of the challenges are that they're either not seeing it as an organisation or an industry that they want to get into, or when they're into it, they're not being nurtured, or they're not being retained. When it comes to women, particularly, if you look at the entry levels, over 50% of entry-level positions within creative agencies are women. But when you look at ECDs, less than 10% are women. So something's happening through that process where diverse minorities are just not being progressed or being retained or being put into the industries. And I think we need to fix that, and we can talk about how we do that a little bit later, and it's what all of us want to do.
Lucy, that's probably a good jumping in point, really. We Are Social. You've launched an initiative recently. What's the background to that from a creative agency point of view?
Can you hear me okay? So Creative Pup Starts was an initiative which is really, it was our grad program 4.0. So a couple of years ago, we canned our grad program. And we said that really what we wanted was people who were creating the work for our clients to come from a far more diverse background. And so we set about trying to do that. And we started, we had a go at it 1 year and we did okay. But this year we really set out and said, right, how are we going to do this significantly different? So we created the program on our own, really. We got so far and then realized, well, we can do the agency bit. We can offer people the chance to come and work for us, but we have got no idea how to actually reach these people. Absolutely no idea. So that's when we started working. We were already working with Isabel and the Creative Mentor Network on their mentoring program. So we were training a couple of people at We Are Social on the mentoring program who were loving it. And that's when we started to get more involved and said, well, actually, what CMM bring to the party is the ability for us to reach the people that we want to. And that was really a light bulb moment where we're going, actually, we can really make this and it can be credible. And so the program worked that we had a launch event. About 75% of the people who came were via CMN network. About 15 of the people, when we came through to the assessment centre, again, about 50% of those guys went through. And we actually gave 3 people a 6-week work placement. But just going back to like the assessment centre, the calibre of people was incredibly high. And these people were from a background that we normally never get. They were probably never heard of the creative industry or being given the opportunity to actually come and present. And they presented to a whole range of people. So people with senior management down to very junior and mid-level who've only just come into the industry themselves. But the quality of the work that they were presenting was incredible. And so we've hired someone from there, and the 2 people who we didn't hire, we still keep in touch and kind of have a mentor. But we've got lots of learnings from that. Also, the feeling internally for doing a program like that and not doing a grad scheme is that everyone recognises in our business that a grad scheme is not going to bring diversity to our work. And we need to widen the pool of bringing people into the agency. And it really created a sense of everybody wants to be in it. I think just like a grad scheme just felt a bit old school. And so 2019 for that program is we just want to actually take it out and beyond London. So again, the creative industry outside of London bubble, a lot of people don't even know what it is. And so we want to try and bring people in from that background. But that's fraught with lots of issues. What are you going to do with people who you bring from Manchester and Cardiff? Where are you going to put them up? Who's going to look after them? Might have been their first time they've ever been to London. So there's lots of different considerations. But the Upstarts program was the first active thing that we did, but actually for us, we've made quite a lot of progress in diversity this year, which we'll come to talk about a little bit more. And I think, to Trevor's point, actually at We Are Social, we over-index. We've got more females than men, which is great. But we don't have a lot of female creatives at all. And that's why we're also getting involved in the Creative Eagles program about bringing women who have been out of the industry for a while back into the industry, which we're really championing, which we're really excited about, because the people who come in from diverse backgrounds not just add to the work, but they add to the whole culture of the agency. We're really supportive about parents. And so that's, so we've got lots of ground to go, but the Upstarts program, for one, where we tried something new and it worked.
Right, thank you. Peter, successful organisation like Soho House, what's the requirement for Soho Impact? What's the motivation for that?
Well, I suppose we spent probably 15 years of our life trying to survive as a business and nearly going out of business quite a few times. And then actually we got to a place where we were actually quite confident we weren't going to go out of business. So we started to get our heads up and look around and think about actually what our community, what our membership want. Like, what is the future of this business? And I think loads of different things happened. Like, we opened up in the Lower East Side of New York, and there was a small but quite vocal group of local people who were a bit like, well, what is Soho House? Like, why are you moving in here? What is it doing for us? And I suppose it made us think as a business that actually we need to sort of unpack what this thing is. It's not an exclusive group of people. It's a community of people trying to do good stuff. So we sort of then got to White City, and we're going to open up in White City, and we had the Grenfell disaster that happened just down the road. And when that did happen, we sort of sent a note out to our members and said, look, we're going to do everything we can to help. Like, if you want to donate stuff, drop it off at our houses. And we sort of put up people who were displaced from the tower. We put them up in our hotel rooms and we fed them. And the sort of outpouring of good that came from that, from our members, made me realise that this community just needs people are super busy, and they just need something that actually is given to them so they can actually do good themselves. So we were a bit like, well, let's look at White City. And then a part of it was my own sort of background. So I'm like northern working class boy, went for a state school education, worked my arse off to get to London. Thought, right, I'm here, I'm on an equal playing field. And I quickly realised that I wasn't, especially in what I was trying to do. It took me years to get the job that I wanted, and I realised that it's actually your network in London, and building that is so important. So we created Soho Impact, and that really is about bringing together our team and our members as one community to try and sort of change the game, really, and just make the creative industries more diverse in its wider sense. So what we've done is we've got people who are local to the different houses, Shoreditch, White City, and who are just at the start of their creative career, and paired them with a member, given them a membership, and just said, meet, talk, and be introduced to different people, and then maybe some stuff can happen. And that's really what Soho Impact is in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. Kieran, slightly different perspective here, which is you're embarking on what I believe to be already a successful career in the music business. What's been your path, and how have you found yourself here? And maybe just reflect on some of the challenges you've faced.
Well, believe it or not, before I used to play basketball. So that was when I was in like year 8, going into year 9. Then in year 9 is when we had to choose our GCSE options as like what we would want to do in future. So I always knew that was like a very big thing to do. So I had to like be honest with myself, and I was like, I don't really love basketball the way how I actually love music. So I decided to drop basketball completely, and then I started doing music. So when I used to speak with like the head of departments, and they were like, oh, so like, what is it that you want to do like over your 2-year course? I was like, oh, I wanted to be a rapper. And they sort of looked at me like, what's that? So I went to the City of London Academy in Southwark. So it's a very like corporate school. And whenever you choose to do music there, what you're really learning is how to read like sheet music, how to play an orchestral instrument. But I didn't want to do any of that. So at the time, getting the support from the teachers, it was a bit hard. So then eventually I just realized, okay, for that the most part of this journey, I may actually have to do this by myself, but I'm just going to keep doing it. And then one day I met a friend, and he had left. So he's in a year above me, so he had left by the time I was in year 11. And I was like, oh, so like, where do you go now? And he was like, oh yeah, I go to ELAM. And ELAM stands for East London Arts and Music. And it's a college that's funded by Universal, but it was set up by Chase and Status. And basically, in my 2 years there, I just spent time actually, 1, networking, but then 2, more or less putting time into my craft and putting like actual effort behind it. So even when I wanted to give up, I had to continue pushing. And one of the things that was actually like fun about ELAM, and one of ELAM's like best qualities, is that they have a lot of masterclasses. So in the masterclasses, you get either music lawyers, like people who come from in-ear monitor companies who speak about like how you can actually damage your ears by listening to music too loud. Then you have artists that actually come in, you have music video directors, A&Rs, managers, and it was like a lot. Now, the one thing that actually became a bit of a struggle was life after ELAM, because you didn't actually have to go anywhere to actually get those contacts when you were in ELAM, because they came to you. And it was a bit like difficult for like the first 2 months. And then someone from the CMN network came and contacted me and said that they have a mentoring program going on, and that I should join it. So I decided to apply. I went through the interview process, and then I ended up being partnered with Jamal Edwards. And yeah, ever since then, we've just been working, meeting at Soho House, and literally just been pushing forward.
But that's an interesting point. I mean, just because someone's talented and they've started their journey doesn't mean that they've got that path totally worked out. And that's kind of what we try to do with Jamal and Kieran. It's like, there's people who are like, they've become a runner in a film. So you look at it and you think, well, they've got it sorted. Well, they don't, because to get then onto that next step, not anyone, but you've got to hustle to get in there, but then you've got to keep hustling. But if you know someone, you can get through that journey much easier. And I just feel like, that's really the insight that's started what we're doing with these guys, and why someone put me in touch with Isabel, and the rest history.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Isabel, maybe just talk a bit more about the value and role of mentoring in terms of the impact that it can have, and maybe we could just talk generally about how we've collectively found that in terms of the impact we can have on young people or people from a diverse background.
Yeah, Peter's right. Like it is that thing, and that's kind of how the Soho Impact partnership came about. Is it is really important for young people. You can have the talent, but that doesn't necessarily get you everywhere, and you need someone to have your back, and you need someone to kind of refer all of these questions to. I think in terms of like the value that mentoring brings in a broad sense, it's like the networks that it brings. There's some really interesting research that I talk about a lot, actually, probably too much, that shows that young people who make 4 or more professional connections before they leave full-time education are 5 times more employable and can earn up to about 20% more. So there's real value in building your social capital. And I think that's one of the huge things that mentoring can bring. I also think like an understanding, it's that kind of support outside of the education system that it gives you. Again, like I really, really believe that parents and schools are really, really outdated in their perception of the labour market and where the jobs lie. Most of the parents, I would say 90% of the parents of the young people that we work with have no idea about the opportunities in the creative industries, no idea of the jobs, no idea how much money you can make, and it seems always like the risky option, and actually it's not, and there are incredibly financially viable careers that you can access. But if you don't know about them, and if you don't know anyone who works in them, from the outside, the creative industries can seem a very opaque and like confusing landscape. And so for me, anyway, the value that I see in mentoring is that gatekeeper into the industry. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, from the creative industry perspective, there's probably there's 3 dimensions of mentorship when it comes to trying to drive inclusion, at least. One is just opening up the opportunities to people that don't realise it, right? The amount of schools I go into where they just don't realise that the things you see on TV or the things you hear on radio or the ads you see are created by people, and people get paid to do that, right? Because they're just not taught that in schools. So the fact that it exists, that Chosen Status have created a forum where people can get involved is great. I work a lot with the Ideas Foundation. The Ideas Foundation is working with schools to inject creativity into the curriculum, working with brands. We did an experiment actually at Facebook with a big brand where we had a brief that went up against a big creative agency with a school that had a creative team. The big creative agency had production and budget, and we offered the same thing to the school, and they just didn't want it. They just wanted to go out and have a camera on their phone and create some stuff. And the stuff that came off the back of it was actually very, very good and looked very, very different to what was being produced by the professionals. You just wouldn't get that insight if you didn't create an opportunity for the people that haven't traditionally been able to see the creative industry as viable for them. So there's that. There's what you do when they're in it. So retaining and nurturing that talent and growing that talent. We mentor a lot of people that are within the creative industries, probably either at an entry level or middle management level, just to figure out how they can start to progress up those senior ranks. We also have a returnship program working with Creative Equals, where, as we've said, there's a massive drop-off of women that at entry level is 50-50, at the ECD level it's 10-90. What happens in those years? So we work with women that have been out of the industry for a number of years, just to give them the skills to come back so they can actually start to be those ECDs. And then it's at the very senior level, because even the senior level people need mentoring, but that may be a little bit different. They may need reverse mentoring, where understanding some of the things they may be missing because they're only associating with the ECDs that are white male or in some white female. There aren't any other outside of that. But putting the voice of the people that they don't associate with into their ears so they can make decisions around who they recruit, how they recruit, how their campaign should be running, what the creative should look like. That's reverse mentoring. So there's 3 types of things there that need to exist in terms of mentoring programs. That means that we are having inclusion and diversity of people in the long run, because as I said right at the very beginning, it's the most important industry, is the creative industry, to have a diverse portfolio of people creating the things that people see.
I mean, just pick up on something, a conversation that Lucy and I had yesterday, is that there is a great fear of making mistakes in this area. That you're going to say the wrong thing, or you're going to try and initiate the wrong kind of program. Maybe could you share any fear around mistakes or things that you feel that you got wrong in setting up your initiative?
I think, to be honest, I'm not sure there's anything we've necessarily got wrong. I think it's more that one of the things that is really obvious is that people find this really difficult subject, and people find it, the terms, they don't want to offend people. I mean, 90% of the world is genuinely good. It's only 10% who fuck everything else up. And people people in the working environment, they want to be supportive and collaborative. But if you don't start that conversation, then how do you expect everybody else in the agency to feel comfortable about that conversation? And so we've had a few instances this year. We had a very uncomfortable situation where a client had questioned the casting that we had put forward. And the creative guys felt really uncomfortable and they were really upset. And then everyone got really upset because no one would talk about it. And and then it all spiraled into like everyone walking out of rooms and crying. And genuinely, it was just because nobody really wanted to understand how to tackle it. So one of the key things is actually just being open and talking about it and saying, we acknowledge we have a problem. This is what we are going to do with it. And actually, I went to a talk of St. Trevor earlier on in the year, and there was a lady Trevor was there and brilliant. There was another lady who was very, very smart, and she talked about data. And she talked about the starting point being is you need to know the problem you've got to then work a plan. And it might be like us, gender, fine, not in certain areas, but we have issues in other areas. But we know that, and therefore we can deal with the facts. So when people get emotional and start to challenge you, and it is an emotional subject, we have the facts, we can talk about it. We can stand up and create programs because we know that information. So I definitely think get some facts and talk about it. And be open when you get things wrong, and because you will get, and people will stumble, and you need to support people on how you do that.
Just add to that. So we talk about less conversation, time for action. I think all the conversation we've had up until now in the industry has been about diversity. Diversity is easy. You just recruit people, and you can fill those numbers. Inclusion is hard because it's a cultural change, right? It's mainly you fill your company with people that you're not used to having in your company. That you give them a voice that you're not used to hearing, that you are having interviews with people and sourcing them from different places that you've never sourced from them before. That's hard and that's uncomfortable, and that means there's language that you have to use that is very different, recruiting techniques you have to use that are very different. Your culture of company has to change as well. So I always give the example of an ECD on a Thursday night. You take your team out because you want to celebrate something or you have a new idea. Traditionally within our industry, it's a Thursday night beer or Thursday night drink. What if you don't drink? What if you're religious and you're not allowed to go out into those situations? What if you are a working mum or dad that has to go home early all the time? You miss out on those incidences of being able to associate yourself and become friendly with the ECD. That has to change if you have a diverse culture or a diverse company that you're working in. So that's why it's hard, because it's a cultural change. And that's what I don't think that we've done. I don't think as an industry we've wanted to put ourselves through that pain and have those cultural moments or cultural changes that we need in order to ensure that the people we work with are as diverse as they need to be.
It's a really important point about inclusion and diversity. I think I got asked that question this morning, and I think that's a fantastic summary. Peter, it's a big subject, diversity, neurodiversity, gender, sexual, ethnicity, and so forth. What advice do you give to the room about trying to unpack that and trying to address the broader piece of diversity in terms of your organisation or any other you've worked in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just got to be realistic, and just, don't set. What we did as a business was take small incremental steps. So look at what could we put, our efforts into to make the biggest impact and the biggest change. And we're by no means perfect as a business, but what we are is real. What we're doing, we believe in, and we're backing up. We're not just talking about it. And when we haven't really talked to members in a wider sense about what we're doing until we've got some results and we can prove it. And I think it's just to Trevor's point. You've got to make that sort of total cultural change within your business. So, you've got to look at the way that you recruit, the way that you set up teams, and then who are those people going out and doing it. If you have not got a diverse HR team, the chances are you're not going to have a diverse workforce. So you've got to really, and they are tough conversations to have internally within a business, because you're basically saying to the person who's put together that team, this team has not been put together in the right way, and we need to make some changes. So, what I suppose the simple advice is, make a plan, make it achievable, because there's nothing worse than over-promising and under-delivering, and then just get on and do it.
I think I would just add to that is that the thing, so for those of you who don't know very much about it, the Soho Impact program that Soho House have been running is a mentoring program, and we match up young people with members. And I think the important thing on figuring out which aspect of diversity and inclusion to focus on is figuring out where you can add the most value. And we sat down and had a conversation about the value of Soho House membership and the social the value of the social and cultural capital that membership can bring to a much younger demographic of creative individuals who are at the very, very start of their creative career. And that's where we thought we could add the most value. It felt really relevant for the house.
And it wasn't about race or gender. It was about socio-economic opportunity, right? That was the thing that was my experience. And obviously, those other things are connected to it, but that was just the thing that we felt passionate about, and we felt we should change.
Yeah. Kieran, just what's mentoring brought to you? How's it added to your career and your thinking?
One thing that mentoring has brought to me is that it's now helped me get my foot in the door in terms of the industry, because when you're when you have talent and when you stay true to yourself and you're original, it's a bit hard to become noticed, because right now, especially in the music industry, we have a large influx of people who are either doing the same thing, sounding the same thing, singing the same thing, and that's become the general export. So that's exactly what radios would expect. That's exactly what PR companies would expect. That it's basically become the norm. So even when you're not sticking to the norm, it's hard to get heard because people ain't really looking for that. And it makes it harder to actually get in because, cool, if you're not making a catchy song, no one's really looking twice. And what the mentoring scheme has actually helped me do, especially with Jamal, is he's put me in a room with people to, first of all, help create content even quicker, but then to even get my content in the rooms and in the spaces with the correct people that would actually stand behind it and support it. And another thing that the mentoring program has actually helped me do, if anything, is actually gain more confidence and make me realize, cool, this is actually possible. We can actually do this. And it's a hard thing, I guess, when you're coming from a disadvantage already, to actually see that cool, it's possible, because it's kind of easy to hear everyone else's story and attempt to draw inspiration from it, but it's when you're not actually seeing it happen for you, it's a bit hard. So yeah, with the whole mentoring program, if anything, it's given me a higher form of confidence. It's put me in the room with the correct people. At Soho House, there's actually a lot of creative people there. So even recently, yesterday, I was in an email conversation with another mentee that was working at an animation company. So now we're working on creating adverts for the single and for the video, etc., etc. So in terms of actually networking and actually building a good base and a good team, the mentoring program, yeah, they've definitely supplied that.
Fantastic. I'm just conscious, we've got 10 minutes left. I wonder if we could just turn our attention to the conversation, moving from conversation to action. And maybe starting with you, Kieran. If you were to advise someone in the audience as to how to address some of the challenges you might have faced, how to break into the creative industry, what advice might you give?
I would always say, stay true to who you are, and also stay true to your values, and also capitalize on any moment that you have to actually network and meet with people. Because if you kind of stay in your bubble, you're not really going to get anywhere, because it's technically only you in your bubble. So yeah, it's just a matter of don't compromise your beliefs, and yeah, just always keep looking out for people, keep helping people, because funny enough, what you'll find is that because you've done something for someone, that person will be willing to go the extra mile for you when you need it. And yeah, it's just a good thing to actually keep building contacts, keep showing people who you are, because it's not exactly good to walk into a room and I guess pretend to be something that you're not, or trade your values just to get someone to be in the same space as you. If anything, it's even good to relate to people or to even be friends with people who don't have the same beliefs, because then that way a new way of thinking is actually created. So yeah, the most I can say is just keep pushing. You can most definitely do it, but just always be open to conversation with many different people.
Right. Generally from the panel, what in terms of business, what does good look like, and what lessons do you think this audience can take away from your experience?
Yes.
We've done quite a bit this year, actually. We did a diversity questionnaire, which sounds really, really formal, but it was actually the whole purpose was to get an understanding of the problems that we have. And from that, we set up a diversity task force, which might sound really cringeworthy, but it wasn't full of senior exec people. It was full of the people who really have got a voice and the voice that we need to hear from. But that led to some really simple things. We created a prayer room in the agency. We made the agency more accessible. Mental health is such an issue within the people that we have in the business, from external and internal factors, that we are training, I think it's 14 people to become mental health first aiders. So that's just like, a few small initiatives, but a greater thing that we're trying to do is create proper change. And actually, to all the things that Trevor's saying, is for culture. So we're actually getting rid of HR, and it's now people and culture. And we are committing to a charter, which is actually more of a pledge to how do we increase and improve in the different areas. And that's being drilled down to everybody, so all department heads. How are you going to help us make us change? What is your responsibility in actually doing this? It can't just be something that we talk about at the exec level and open it up to everybody. So it's very early stages, but we've done more. So talk about action. We've done more things that we ever done before. So far, it's all worked, and we'll keep going.
Right.
But I think doing things rather than just worrying about it. And the other thing I would say is work with partners, because you don't have all the answers. You'll be amazed when you look at the industry how many people aren't doing anything, worrying about it. And there is a lot of experts out there that you can align yourself, like the Creative Mentor Network. Lloyd's have got some really interesting insights. Beam, they're all doing some interesting stuff. So don't suffer in silence and worry about it. Go out to other experts and get some advice.
Right. Isabel?
I was actually just going to pick up on that last point, that I think it is really important. I think the thing that everyone on this panel has done really well is work with partners, and I think that's really important. It feels like it's something that easy to, to Trevor's point about, diversity is easy. It's inclusion is the more difficult part, and I think that's a really easy trap to fall into, and think that just because you're hiring in the right places and your workforce looks like it's at the right percentages, that you're doing things right. But I think, as Lucy says, there are an amazing number of amazing partners. Like the Ideas Foundation is one, Creative Mentor Network is another, Stripes is another. There are so many organisations you can go to for advice and support on this particular subject that it feels quite arrogant in a way to think that you can do it by yourself. So that would be my main advice.
You asked what's successful, what good looks like. I think everyone knows, if you're working in an organisation, that either's taking it seriously or not, right? You do. You look around. Do people look different? Are they being brought into decision making? Shared paternity leave. Does your company both offer it but actively encourage it and celebrate when it's actually been taken, particularly by men? Because that is a way that you start to solve the issue around women being able to continue their path of career within the creative industry. Are there differences around celebrating success in terms of the Thursday night drinks? Are the ECDs encouraging other people in the room to talk and take their ideas? Everyone knows that when things are working, when they're not. If you're working for an agency, are you part of the Advertising Diversity Task Force? I know there's probably about 6 or 7 pillars within there, that maybe 2 or 3 of those are the ones that are actually viable. But if your agency isn't saying we're part of this and we want to make change on screen, and we want to make change in terms of what our teams look like, and we want to make sure that when we're shooting, that there are diverse characters within that. You know when your company's taking it seriously, and if they're not doing any of those things, do you have the ability or the permission to ask the question? Because again, if you don't have that ability to ask the question, then the organisation isn't taking it seriously. So that's when you start to need to push those sorts of things. So when you're working in an organisation that isn't pushing this. but there are also things you can do in order to help the organisation start to push against the things they need to do in order to become more diverse and inclusive.
Peter, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think the guys have covered it pretty well. I mean, I just think you've got to, I think I'd summarise it as you've just got to live the culture. Yes, if you're making that change, you've got to actively live it and push it every single day. Because it's the moments of stress where things start to fall away. So yeah, that's all I've got to say on it.
Right. I've got time for maybe one quick question or two questions from the floor. We've got a mic going out. Anyone got a question for the panel?
I will actually start with one, if that's all right. So Creative Pool is a network of 250,000 creative individuals, well, people who work within the creative industries, and 20,000 agencies. Is there anything that we personally could be doing to help on this topic?
Sorry, is there anything that
They can do.
Creative Pool can do?
That we could do, Creative Pool.
Yeah.
Of the agencies, how are you making them accountable to delivering on and diversity means one of two things. One is that their companies, that their organisations look diverse, or the things that they're creating reflect the society in which they are.
Oh, we're not involved in that at all. That's the thing. We're just a platform for them to be able to showcase what they do and to be able to push that out to the wider creative network.
But as a platform, you can ask the question, right? You can say, this is what we stand for, this is what we want to see, here's some of the values that we want as people that are part of Creative Pool. Are you mapping to those values? I mean, that's not saying that you're actually pushing, but you're making a statement of intent about, we believe that in order for the creative industry to be the best it can be, it needs to both have the diversity within its people, and the output looks diverse as the society it serves. There's no reason why you can't do that if you have that many agencies that you contact. You can say, this is what we stand for, these are our pillars, and these are the things that you should be thinking of if you want to be part of the Creative Pool going forwards.
Yeah, and I would just add to that like, I suppose one of the things about diversity is that it doesn't necessarily come to you, like, you know, particularly with the younger kind of diverse talent that we work with, young people don't know necessarily about the creative industries. They don't really know what advertising is. As Trevor said, they don't necessarily know that there are a huge team of people behind Instagram posts that they look at or behind the videos that they watch. I think there's a huge job to be done around, like, I mean, I talk about careers education a lot, and it is actually, maybe it's a bit boring, but like, there's like no careers education in the creative industry. So as a huge platform with a network of amazing agencies, maybe that's somewhere that you could add value.
Great. Well, hopefully you guys can all help me to do it.
I think the thing that I would add is that behavioural change, organisational change comes from celebrating symbols of re-evaluation and success. And I think what you have with this panel are people that are demonstrating action, not just talking about it. So whether it's the Soho Impact or Pup Starts or Creative Mentor Network or, you know, We Are Stripes, and publicising, you know, Kieran's latest track, which is coming out in December, I think. I think all those things are of great value and important to your audience.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi, my name's Monica. I work for McCann Manchester, so I've come down today, and it's been really interesting. We have a really different challenge in Manchester in that we've got a much smaller pool of people, and I work in digital, so I have the added bonus of advertising in digital, and there's not many women. I'm interested in understanding, advertising has been around for a lot longer than the digital industries have. I think women in tech is a different problem entirely. How do you think, as an industry, we can make change? The initiatives you've talked about are great, but I agree. We've got pipeline issues all the way through from about year 8 to 9 in school, all the way through with leavers, returners, and that's why people aren't making their way through. So, yeah, what are the big things that we can come together to do, I guess is my question.
Well, I'm a trustee of the Ideas Foundation, and which is a lot of work in Manchester. And the idea is just injecting the idea of what it is to be a creative into schools and into the curriculum, because it's just not happening. And that gives them the flavour of, at least gives them understanding and awareness of what it is, gives them some hand-on experience in that. I mean, it's going for 20 years, but it's really now where brands like Burberry and Nike are really coming together and with us and saying, look, here are some briefs that we just want to inject into these schools and just do one of two things. One is to actually help the curriculum and help the kids understand what it is to curate their career for something that they don't really understand. But two, actually just have a look at the output and see actually if it's stuff we can use because it's coming from a different flavour and a different mindset. We need to scale that, right? We need to ensure that there are companies and brands that are willing to do that, because it's not going to be done by the education system, it's not going to be done by government, it's going to be done by those sorts of people. So that will hopefully, in the very, very long term, start to address the pipeline issue and at least get people understanding what a job in the creative industry in its many forms actually means, because that's half the problem. You walk into a school and they have no idea, but we need to fix that.
I think, just before we close, I think the thing I'd just add is, some of the recruitment process, some of the activities that agencies, creative companies are used to running, they need to be changed, they need to be amended, they need to be revised. The whole graduate entry thing, I think what, We Are Social do is really interesting. From a tech point of view, from my business point of view, I know that we can access talent if we bypass all the traditional methods of recruitment. And I think that's a big call, because there's a comfort blanket in that for organisations and businesses. But we have to do that. And I think things like Creative Mentor Network, giving young people access at an early stage so they get a taste for the industry, and actually giving industry a taste for the talent is really valuable.